Hello and bonjour. I am Sarah Bokhari and you're watching Power Dilemma here at TAG TV. Ontario PC leader Doug Ford's big campaign promise for minimum wage workers announced this week is to offer them an income tax credit. Ford is pitching this as a relief for people that are working their back off for minimum wage. He said the move would give a full-time worker earning $14 an hour about $800 extra in a year. He says the program would cost the province roughly $500 million a year. As Premier, he would only have jurisdiction over the provincial income tax. At the time, an independent economic analysis showed low-income workers would benefit more from a higher minimum wage, a Liberal plan, than lower taxes. The analysis from the Canadian Centre for Policy Alternatives found the planned wage hike would bring people more money than a tax cut would save them. Moreover, war of words has heightened between Kathleen Wayne and Doug Ford. The PC leader pledges to probe the entirety of Kathleen Wayne's fiscal mess and follow the money to see how your tax dollars are really being spent. Progressive Conservative leader said that if he is elected, he'll commission an outside audit of Wayne's reckless spending on his first day in office. If Kathleen Wayne tried to pull these kinds of shady tricks in private life, then there would be a few more Liberals joining David Livingston in jail, Ford said. Livingston, the last chief of staff to former Premier Dalton McGuinty, is free on bail after being sentenced last week to 4 months in jail for the wiping of computer hard drives related to the cancelled gas plants affair. While neither McGuinty nor Wayne was implicated in the investigation or subsequent trial, Ford said the conviction demonstrated the need for responsibility, accountability and trust in government after almost 15 years of Liberal rule. On the other hand, Wayne is also calling Doug Ford as Donald Trump. Is it fair? To talk about this and more, we have Mr. Ari Laskin, a political strategist with Capitol Hill Group. How are you, Ari?
I'm well, thank you, and thanks for having me, Sarah.
Okay, so Ari, why is Kathleen Wayne referring Doug Ford to Donald Trump? Is it fair even, or what is this blame game?
I think this is a distraction. This is an absolute sign of desperation on the Premier's part to go and start trying to say that, you know what, she's above the fray and she's running on a very clean record and she's running an above-board campaign with no mudsling or anything. I think that's absolutely ridiculous. Just the other day, the Liberal Party of Ontario put out an attack ad against Doug Ford, saying this is the real Doug Ford. This is what you need to know about him and what have you. The fact of the matter remains that the Liberals in the past 15 years haven't done very much to improve the lives of the average Ontarian. Ontario is not doing any better. Moody's just downgraded our economy another time now to a negative rating. And you're going to see businesses that are just going to start closing up shop and saying this is not the province or the jurisdiction for us to engage in. You also have the minimum wage hike that the Liberal government rushed through. And in my honest opinion, I do think that you do need to see a minimum wage increase. But I don't think that you need to be seeing the minimum wage increase at the rate or at the speed at which the government is trying to push this forward. This is not a responsible move. This is something that is sheer desperation, and we need to get back to the business of making sure that Ontario is profitable.
Yeah, so I was actually about to ask you about Doug Ford's announcement on the minimum wage. Do you think there is this analysis by this economic organization, and they're saying no, it is not going to be beneficial for taxpayers. It is not going to be beneficial for minimum wage earners if Ford gives them a tax break. Is that true?
So I'm not an economist. I can't say one way or another if that's true or false. But what I can say is when you look at the people that are working at Policy Alternatives or the Centre for Policy Alternatives, this is a Liberal think tank. Just like you have the Fraser Institute, which has been called a conservative think tank.
Okay.
Of course, they're always going to be spinning things according to what their political ideology is saying. So I would take what they have to say with a grain of salt. That being said, I haven't seen their study, and like I said, I am not an economist.
Okay, so moving forward, Ari, after Charles Sousa's 2018 budget, which would add $32 billion to our provincial debt, Moody's has downgraded Ontario's outlook from stable to negative. What is your take on this, Ari?
I think it's a very clear response to the economic environment that we're looking at right now. We have Ontario is saying, or the government rather, is saying that we've created more jobs and we've been helping more people, and now more people are getting free medication, more people are getting free tuition, more people are getting free daycare, free childcare. Well, I have some news. None of this stuff is free. Somebody has to pay for it always at the end of the day. There is no such thing as free healthcare. There is no such thing as free pharmacare. There is no such thing as free childcare. There is a cost to all of this. And for the government to go and say that we're doing the responsible thing, and you had MPP Bob Delaney said a few weeks ago that this is what the people of Ontario wanted, and this is the responsible thing to do to put us back into a state of debt. Well, I'm sorry, Mr. Delaney, you're not the one who's going to end up paying the debt. It's going to be going to the next generation. And that next generation, quite frankly, has not been given any tools to try to improve the lot of their economy or try to improve their own lives. So I'm very enthusiastic and very hopeful to see a Premier Ford at Queen's Park.
So, Ari, Tory MPP Jim Wilson said that Liberals are clearly campaigning on the taxpayer dime each and every day. Is it true? Of course it's true, so just elaborate on this.
Yeah, it is somewhat true, but I think, again, I would look at that, again, with a grain of salt, is they're re-announcing things that they presented in the budget. They've said from the get-go that this is the budget that they're going to be heading into the 2018 campaign with. So it is reasonable to say that they are campaigning on the taxpayer's dime. If this is their campaign platform, then they shouldn't be going out there with cabinet ministers and using public funds or government funds to try to promote these concepts or these ideas. If the government is going to continue going forward with this, then I would suggest that they debate the budget and have their budget passed so that it's no longer a campaign platform and it's now government policy. And then by all means, you can continue making these announcements. But right now, as we currently stand, the budget has not been passed. This is a way for the government to try to gain public support and try to distract from the past 15 years of mismanagement and irresponsibility.
So let's talk a little bit about the kind of campaign Ontario will be seeing. Is it going to be a nasty campaign?
Oh, Sarah, I hope it won't be, but I have a feeling it will be. I think that we're looking at, we have 25 days until the writ is supposedly dropped. This is not even the tip of the iceberg of nastiness that we're going to get. It's going to, unfortunately, I think it's going to go further and further down into the rabbit hole in terms of mudslinging and attack ads. There was a comment that I read on Facebook the other day that somebody from the Liberal camp said, well, you know what, attack ads really work because this is what people want to see. And if the opposition, in this case the progressive Conservatives, are going to go all negative, then we should be doing the exact same thing, fight fire with fire. I don't know. I haven't seen a negative ad that's been put out by the PC Party of Ontario yet.
So yeah, I had a look at the Liberals' attack ad at Ford. What are the Liberals going to gain after all this mudslinging?
Well, I think they're going to be looking at a third-party status as the only thing that they're going to be gaining. I think right now you're looking at, you had Deb Matthews saying that according to the polls, it's really only a two-party race between the Liberals and the Progressive Conservatives. I think she's right. It is only a two-party race, but I don't think it's between the Conservatives and the Liberals. I think it's going to be between the Conservatives and the New Democrats. The Liberals, like I've said before and said previously on your show, have been in power for the past 15 years. That is a long time to keep on saying we're bringing care back to the province. We're going to be giving you more money, or we're going to be giving you more benefits. I don't see any of these benefits. I just see my tax dollars going up and up and up, and I'm seeing my services get reduced that much further. So I don't know really what they're trying to get at, but quite frankly, I don't think that we're going to be looking at a Liberal Party in the same way that it is right now.
At this time, I really want to show our viewers that, you know, we are living in democracy and it's free speech, but do we have a room for these negative campaigns against each other? What is your take on this? Because I really want to get a sense of how politics are played in a modern civilization in Canada.
Well, so I've managed campaigns before at all levels of government, municipal to federal and local campaigns, central campaigns. So I've seen all of this stuff happen. And, excuse me, I can honestly say that negative campaigning has its place. There's definitely a point for it, and that point is to show distinction and to distinguish your candidate from the other person. And in that case, I think that a negative campaign really is a very short-lived tactic. And from that point on, the more you mention the other side, the more news and media attention you're giving them, the less media attention and news you're getting for yourself. So while I do think that there is a place for negative campaigning, I think you need to be very tactful in how you're going to be using it. And I also think that it needs to be very strategic. This is not something that the entire writ period of 30-something odd days, 36 days, is going to be just one attack ad after another. I think that, to me, is a sign of desperation, and basically strikes me as you do not have any substance of your own.
Okay, Ari, it was so good to talk to you always. We will talk to you later. Thank you so much for participating in my show today.
Thank you.
So, folks, after 40 years, the federal government is removing rules that turned away disabled immigrants. The government will no longer be allowed to reject permanent resident applications from those with serious health conditions or disabilities. After 4 decades, the federal government is getting rid of rules that turned away would-be immigrants with intellectual or physical disabilities. Immigration Minister Ahmed Hussain said Monday, the government will no longer be allowed to reject permanent resident applications from those with serious health conditions or disabilities. Most of those impacted by the policy have been economic immigrants already working and creating jobs in Canada, but whose children or spouses may have a disability, Hussain said. The current provisions on medical inadmissibility are over 40 years old and are clearly not in line with Canadian values or our government's vision of inclusion. The minister cited the case of a tenured professor at York University who was denied permanent residence because his son had Down syndrome, and another case of a family that came to Canada and started a business but were rejected because of a child with epilepsy. We have today with us renowned political analyst, Mr. Ali Naqvi, and he is a specialist in immigration issues, and we are going to ask him questions regarding this. Hello, Mr. Naqvi, how are you?
Good day, Ms. Bokhari. Thanks for having me.
Okay, so the minister said the current provisions on medical inadmissibility are over 40 years old and are clearly not in line with Canadian values or our government's vision of inclusion. Is it true, Mr. Naqvi?
I would agree with the symbolic nature of his statement. However, when we look at the current government's history since October 2015, what we see is that this is a government that is governing with perception and not action. I call it a selfie government. Not only they are selfish, but they are out to only promote themselves. So let's look at the announcement made by the Minister of Immigration. The Minister of Immigration says all the right things. The United Nations have criticized the government of Canada for our human rights contravention when people with disability are denied or found medically inadmissible for Canadian immigration. However, if you look at the real policy, you should see that the threshold amount of medical costs for medical inadmissibility now will be tripled. This means that many applicants who require higher medical costs to deal with their conditions, such as HIV-positive individuals who use government-funded prescriptions, may now no longer be medically inadmissible. However, not everybody will be immune from medical inadmissibility. So yes, we are opening the door, but we are not there yet. There is no blanket exemption. So a significant number of people who have previously been found to be medically inadmissible will not fall under this category. However, there will be people, especially senior citizens, whose medical conditions will impact their immigration, as well as people who would not fall under the current threshold of medical costs. They will be impacted as well. So kudos to Liberals for doing this, because nobody has actually done that. People have been, the immigration advocates, the human rights advocates have been fighting for this change. However, this is a good beginning, but we are not there yet.
Okay, but you know, the question arises that previously, if the past governments did not open this admissibility of particularly people with HIV/AIDS, the question arises, wouldn't the citizens, Canadian citizens or permanent residents or people who are living in Canada, wouldn't they be threatened by incoming people who have HIV/AIDS, like it's a contagious disease?
So it's not only HIV/AIDS, it's also other contagious issues like tuberculosis and other blood-related diseases. However, these people are disadvantaged already, and if we discriminate with them because of their medical condition, that goes to show that we do not practice what we preach when it comes to human rights.
Okay.
So this is a human rights issue. The number of medically inadmissible applicants is not that great. However, this also shows that we have failed to do something right. We are trying to right this wrong now. We were hoping with the prior statements of the minister that it's going to be a blanket exemption, which it is not. However, it's opening the door to correct something that we have failed to correct in the past. Now, in regards to contracting contagious diseases from people who are coming from overseas, HIV/AIDS, people with HIV/AIDS are allowed to travel to Canada on a visitor status or, to visit Canada. So anybody can be impacted by a traveler. We should not forget the SARS epidemic that Ontario faced a few years ago. This was so, all these diseases can always come to Canada, and Canadians having diseases travel overseas, and we can give these diseases to others. So it's, human race has medical issues, and we live in a world where we have to be very open to accepting people with disabilities, people with medical conditions.
Okay, so that being said, that it's a human rights issue that people with medical medical disabilities should be allowed in Canada. But isn't it going to be a burden on Canadian economy that Canadian economy will be taking care of these people? It's just like the same argument as the Syrian refugees argument. Why should Canadian economy be paying?
So we can talk about Syrian refugees later. However, when it comes to, and this was in the Immigration and Refugee Protection Act, the extraordinary burden on Canadian medical resources was the term used for finding people with medical conditions inadmissible to Canada. Now, what we are saying here is human rights trumps dollars and cents. Now, I don't know if the government is going to say, okay, in the future, people coming in with such kind of diseases, immigrating to Canada with such kind of diseases, will have to buy private medical insurance. I don't know. That is a possibility. We should not forget that few years back, the Supreme Court of Quebec and the Federal Court of Canada came out with decisions, groundbreaking decisions. So the Federal Court of Canada said, unless and until the applicant does not need medical treatment, but only needs social services, services as therapies, etc. And if the applicant or applicant sponsors or parents can afford to buy those therapies or social services, the applicant could not be found inadmissible. So again, people who were well off were qualifying under those decisions. The Supreme Court of Quebec said, which the federal government later challenged in Supreme Court of Canada, is that, you know, somebody with a hip condition who wanted to buy private medical insurance to get a hip replacement without waiting in line for years has the right to do so. Although it is not available in Canada, the medical insurance I'm talking about, they found it a contravention of human rights. The federal government challenged it in the Supreme Court of Canada, and I believe the decision is still pending on that. However, the doors have been sort of opening legislatively by the judiciary on this point. My concern is this may also, just like we saw in medical insurance, private medical insurance was opened under the guise of super visas for parents and grandparents. So that could be, and I hope not, another venue for private medical insurance to seep in to Canadian immigration and refugee process and law.
What were the reasons this was not allowed for the past 40 years? And how have things changed? Like, what was the major impetus for this amendment to be tabled?
They are trying to create a political perception that they are pro-immigrants. The numbers of people being removed from Canada, who are failed refugee claimants, who are out of status, people who have been found to have misrepresented certain issues, unless and until they are ministers of the Crown, are being removed, and they're being removed on in a bigger number than under the previous Conservative government. So, but on the other hand, they want to create a perception that they are immigrant friendly. Immigrants vote for us. They want immigrants to become Canadian citizens, so that, you know, the perception continues. However, we should not forget that in the first act that the current Minister of Immigration had to enforce, it was announced under the law, under the previous immigration minister, but the first act that Mr. Hussein had to enforce was creating a quota for Syrian refugees. So suddenly in January it was announced end of December, just before the holidays, Mr. Ahmad Hussein comes in as the minister in January of 2017. The first file he had to deal with was freeze the Syrian refugees, because suddenly the polls said, okay, we have brought in too many. People are kind of concerned in Canada that there are too many refugees coming in. Okay, so we are going to stop it. So you get our minister, who himself had been a refugee, who belongs to a certain faith, who looks like a certain complexion, and get him to do something, in my opinion, stop something which was very positive when it comes to human rights. So similarly, skilled worker applications, there is a clear-cut preference to various countries and clear-cut negative implications on other countries. Students from Pakistan, the rate of approval is negligible. Students from India and China are fast-tracked. Spousal sponsorships, the same thing, takes very long from various countries, takes very short from others. So it is all geared towards certain demographics who are going to vote for them when it comes for the time to vote.
So you just mentioned that students' application from Pakistan, the approval rate is negligible compared to India and China. Why is that so? Because the liberal government or liberal politicians always seek their vote from mostly, you know, the Muslim Pakistani communities.
Well, for the same reason that Mr. Trudeau refused to go to Pakistan. The tradition and the political tradition is that whenever the Prime Minister travels to India, he also travels to Pakistan, like John Brechin, another Liberal Prime Minister, like Premier Dalton McGuinty of Ontario. When he went to India, he also went to Pakistan. Not Mr. Trudeau. Right?
Yeah, why?
Well, he loved to be insulted in India. That's fine. I mean, the insult was for Canada, not him.
Okay. The question do arise why Justin Trudeau, just like other leaders, visited India but did not visit Pakistan. That's a question to probe later. So, you know, getting back to the Liberal government and to the recent amendments by the minister, what do you think? How are they going to tackle the immigration or the entrance of future refugees in Canada?
So we talked about so it's Immigration, Refugee, and Citizenship Canada, which the current minister deals with. So we talked about immigration. We talked about we haven't talked about citizenship. They brought in rules of citizenship that were amended by the previous government. Excuse me, and they're almost the same as the rules under the last Liberal government for citizenship. And they also, in terms of immigration, changed the age of the dependent child from 19 to 22. However, when it comes to refugees, I mentioned what happened in 2017, where the refugee applications were frozen to 1,000 applications every year. So that cap that was open, that welcome mat that was placed, those photo ops with Syrian refugees, with the Prime Minister claiming directly to a Syrian refugee, if I was not the Prime Minister, you wouldn't be here, that's on record, is over. So Syrian refugees can come to Canada, 1,000 applications every year since 2017. Now another scenario has arisen. Thousands of refugees have entered Canada illegally in various provinces from United States, most of them coming to Quebec.
Okay.
These are the people who I claim are persecuted because of their race, religion, ethnicity, language they speak in United States. However, the government of Canada does not agree with it because in our humble opinion, in government of Canada's humble opinion, U.S. is a safe third country. Let's not forget, U.S. is not a safe third country because U.S. is not a signatory on international conventions against torture. Now, unfortunately, we don't care about it, and we refuse to abolish the protocols of the safe third country. So, all these people who fear that they would be detained, arrested, and deported to their countries of original citizenship have been flocking to Canada. And they cannot come in through the border with coming to the Canada Border Services Agency and making refugee claims. So they are entering Canada illegally through certain checkpoints and making refugee claims. Now, why they have to do it? Because under the Safe Third Country Treaty, only people who have close relatives in Canada can make a refugee claim at the port of entry, at the land border, sorry. And these people, because they are coming from US, therefore they cannot do so. So they're breaking the law, entering into Canada. We, under the international conventions of United Nations, have to provide them, and rightly so, a chance to prove their case. And thousands have come in, only in Quebec. The last number I saw was 8,000, and they have been coming in since August. And they started with the Haitian population residing in the U.S. when the hold on their removal was taken away. There are two more countries that Central and South American countries where holds have been removed. So people are flocking into Canada. And the Canada Border Services Agency is overwhelmed. The Immigration and Refugee Board of Canada is overwhelmed. And there has been thousands of cases since 2009 in the Refugee Board that have been pending. Now you add another thousands more to it. And if I remember correctly, the last chairman of the Immigration and Refugee Board of Canada basically said that we are unable to process these cases because the government is unable to or is not willing to provide us with the resources to process these cases. So, unfortunately, there is this huge pile of pending cases, and these are all human stories. We understand refugees are fleeing persecution. These are people who are asking us to give us a chance for a safe new life. And under the international law and Canadian law, we have to provide them with that opportunity. But the government is failing them to provide, failing the system by not providing ample resources.
So when you say the government is failing, doesn't it look like a contradiction? At one point, it is creating an image of that everyone is welcome to Canada, refugees and people with medical disabilities, but then it is not really helping these people to come into Canada. Doesn't it look like a kind of a contradiction?
Prime Minister never had the guts to criticize Mr. Trump for any ban, may it be the Muslim ban or may there be removals or taking away the holds. However, following Mr. Trump, he is in, his contracted the disease of tweeting, and Mr. Trudeau tweeted that Canada is open for refugees, whereby Canada, frankly, is not. I mean, yes, if you come in, we will take you, and I'm very pro-refugees. I'm an advocate for refugees. But what we should do is we should withdraw ourselves from the Third Country Treaty and say...
And what is this Safe Third Country Treaty?
Safe Third Country Treaty basically United States and Canada are safe countries, and there are restrictions on how a person can claim refugee status in one of these countries coming from one of these countries. So people coming from United States who wish to make refugee or asylum applications in Canada need to have close relatives, parents, grandparents, brothers, sisters, niece, nephew, uncle, aunt, to be able to come to a border and make a refugee claim. And there are other restrictions as well. And the assumption is that these countries are safe. So if I'm in the United States and I'm safe in the United States, then I should not and cannot come to Canada and make a refugee claim here. However, I still can if I enter illegally into Canada, and that's what all these good human beings are doing. Thousands of them have walked into Canada, and we are entertaining them, and rightly so. However, we are failing to provide enough resources. The provincial government are Manitoba, may it be British Columbia, may it be Quebec, they are after these people to the best of their abilities. But when it comes to the federal government, we are not putting the money where our mouth is. We create a lot of perceptions, but we act against those perceptions. It's all targeted. It's all, people think we are pro-refugees. So people who are old refugees and their generations will vote for us. People think we are pro-immigrants, so immigrant population will vote for us. So, and they're very good at it. They are creating this perception. People line up and vote for them. But sooner or later, people will realize that they have been living in fantasy world, and since Prime Minister's trip to India, a debacle is a small word to call it. People have started seeing the true face of.
It was a fancy dress show, actually.
Sorry?
Fancy dress show in India.
Well, we all know that our Prime Minister wants to dress up.
So, yeah, thank you so much, Mr. Naqvi. An amazing, elaborate account on the latest amendments made by the Minister of Citizenship and Immigration, Ahmed Hussain. We will catch up later. Thank you so much for participating in my show.
Thank you for inviting me. Take care. Bye-bye.
Barbara Bush, former First Lady, died on Tuesday. A spokesman for the Bush family announced. She was 92 years old. Bush, the wife of former President George W. Bush, had been suffering from chronic obstructive pulmonary disease and congestive heart failure. A spokesman for her family had announced Sunday that she would no longer seek medical treatment after a recent series of hospitalizations. Her son, former President George W. Bush, released a statement to the press on behalf of himself, his wife, and his twin daughters. As First Lady from 1989 to 1993, she was known for her work on early childhood education. In 1989, she established the Barbara Bush Foundation for Family Literacy with the goal of raising awareness about the importance of reading and writing at a young age. She was also recognized for her work on AIDS awareness and cancer research. Some more news. There was an incident of racism which happened in the U.S. On Thursday, two men had asked to use the restroom at Starbucks, but were told that the bathrooms are for customers only. They occupied a table without making a purchase, and a manager called the police after the men declined to leave the premises because they said they were waiting for an acquaintance. They were escorted out by police but were not charged with a crime. A manager who called the police is no longer working at the store, said Starbucks. Could implicit bias training prevent an incident like the one at a Philadelphia Starbucks in which these two black men were arrested after asking to use the restroom? The word implicit bias, very important for my viewers, or some variation of it, has been used by Starbucks CEO. Implicit bias is the automatic associations people have in their minds about groups of people, including stereotypes. It forms automatically and unintentionally, but results in attitudes, behaviors, or actions that are prejudiced for or against a person or a group of people. The nature of implicit bias is such that you cannot subjectively experience when it's influencing you, said a Professor Jack Glisser at University of California, Berkeley. Implicit bias gives rise to shooting bias as well. Can we make diversity and inclusion training and sensitivity training for all workers? With this thought, we'll see you next week at Power Dilemmas, TAG TV. Ciao and thank you.